Russell's been tearing it up with the different kayak bass fishing tournaments in West Virginia and Pennsylvania. I'm gonna do a little bit of Q&A with him to kind of pick his brain a little bit on what's working, because clearly something is working for you. So I guess one of the most important things in tournament fishing is research.
It is.
Is, learning as much you can about a fishery before you, and you've done well on, tell us your last two, where you've won tournaments that weren't really your home water.
No, none of these rivers and lakes are my home waters. What's happening is I'm challenging myself to go out and learn more that I can bring back to my local waters and expand on that. So what I've done this year is challenge myself to fish in Mountain State Kayak Anglers. They're out of West Virginia. I'm going to do their full trail this year, which is 8 tournaments all over the state of West Virginia. None of these tournaments are less than 3 hours from me, except for their championship, which is still an hour from me. So what I'm doing this year is actually physically studying Google Maps and tournaments they have for boat tournaments, and look at size bags and past history, and looking what my current knowledge that I have and see what's best for me. Where I play role into what my rig is here is Mountain State Kayak Anglers is a non-motor club, but pre-fishing they allow whatever your means of fishing are, whether it's a bass boat, a kayak, a canoe, or my kayak with the Torqeedo on it. So normally I work Monday through Thursday. I fish Friday, tournament Saturday, travel home Saturday night, family day on Sunday. It seems like a lot, but with the Torqeedo, I'm able to cover mileage to narrow down my spot. So the mileage there may be a 2-mile jaunt across the river, where the next day I realized that 2 miles wasn't necessary. A mile or a half a mile was the prime area where I'm able to use the flex drive to take me. Now during that flex drive time, I can still pay attention to my electronics and everything else because it's hands-free, and I'm able to look at my electronics pod and pay attention to everything that I need to see, whether it's side vision, down vision, or just a regular traditional sonar. So that's like the big key for me this year, is just able to dissect the water by being hands-free.
So you're covering a lot of water, like you said, with the motor, but also with the flex drive in tournament play. You're using that. How are you learning the patterns? I think that's one of the biggest challenges. Yeah, you have to learn the location, but you have to learn what they're going to eat.
For me, it's mimicking exactly what's available to them. Some lakes you go to where crawfish are not available. Granted, crawfish is a natural eatery or natural bait that they would eat, but if it's not in a lake, it's kind of something weird for them to see. So if a bluegill or crappie or just any other type of minnow is the primary forage, I spend a majority of my time looking at what's available. So it's not necessarily fishing, but maybe seeing a school of bluegill to where I can imitate a bluegill, whether it's through a swim bait, a crankbait, or something along that. I give them something very natural that they can key in on.
How do you decide how fast you're fishing? And really what I'm getting at is, you have, and I'm just going to point at what you got here. You got a Ned rig on there, and you got a crankbait. And to me, those are sort of opposite. One is a, hey, eat it now or it's gone, and one of them is a, yeah, no, I'm gonna hang out here a while and you can eat me when you want. It's finesse versus power fishing. How do you take that barometer of deciding what's gonna work on a particular day?
Power fishing's always first, but with power fishing, like we're set up now, I'm also using it to feel the bottom. So if I feel the bottom and we're fishing a ledge system, and I feel the bottom and then all of a sudden I can't feel it, knowing that the crankbait goes roughly 6 to 7 feet deep, I know that that's dropped off to where it's a slower pull behind it. So I'll make that same exact cast with a Ned rig or a jig and pull it to that ledge and let it fall over where they can be sitting for ambush, and it's at natural fall and presentation.
Nice. So give us a little bit of insight. You sort of alluded to assessing the forage. You do any sort of flipping rocks or scooping stuff up with the net or anything along those lines to figure it out, or looking on your depth finder for schools of shad? How are you figuring out what colors they are, what size they are, what species they are?
Generally, the boat ramp is my best friend. Boat ramps are a place a lot of fishermen dump their empty bait, the worms, or whatever they're not using. So generally, a lot of bait fish will gather around places where they're commonly fed at. So I use the boat ramp as my number one source of information, because a lot of times you can tell, you can see, you can walk out on the water on the dock without physically getting in the water. Normally there's a lot of chunk rock in the area where you can see crabs just hanging around, or actually what size the bait fish are. But I'm also not apt to fishing for bluegills for today. To catch a bluegill, look at its color, maybe catch 4 or 5 of them and find out that medium color of where they look like. Nice.
Give me a rundown of the patterns that helped you win some of your tournaments this year. Maybe you don't want to give that up.
No, I'll give it up.
Do it again next year.
Honestly,
you've had some repeats.
Yes, I have. I've had some repeats, and I've went back to back in Mountain State Kayak Anglers. And the back-to-back tournaments were 2 completely opposite tournaments. Both of them were lake tournaments, but one was a river that was canceled 24 hours before the event, where I had to make an adjustment right then and there on what to fish. So I chose a lake, went there that night. I didn't get there till 6 o'clock in the afternoon, so I had roughly 2 hours of daylight, and noticed that the fish were on beds. And the way I noticed that the fish were spawning is because you had a pod of bluegills, then there was nothing for a couple feet, then another pod of bluegills. And anytime one of those bluegills left their pod, a deeper bedding bass would show theirself to keep them from evading their nest. So that was a ticket for me, was to imitate a bluegill and use it for finding the fish. Not necessarily are they eating those bluegills, they will nose them and push them out of the way, saying, this is my home, this is my area, you can't come in. And once I would get those bluegills to lay away, I would honestly throw a Senko and put it in their nest, let the bass come back and get comfortable, and then I would move it from below them. They would feel the twitch of the bait, they would nose down and engulf it, because it was now something that was invading their nest.
Nice. Well, you got a tournament on this fishery coming up in a couple weeks. What are your, how are you dialing in the patterns here? And I will say, you may not have the same water conditions now that you'll have in 2 weeks.
Honestly, it's just familiarity with the water. It's learning where different ledges are, the depths, feeding areas, whether there's chunk rock on a bank, where bait fish can hide, where a school of bass can work at bank.
So what are your major feeding areas that you're seeing out here? Where are you getting bites today, and where do you expect to get them in 2 weeks?
Today it's eddy lines. Eddy lines right off of fast water. It's that quote-unquote conveyor belt system of feeding. They're able to stay in the eddies, relax, but they're able to come out in the eddy, grab something to eat, and dart by. So today the crankbait has been the #1 producer, where I'm fishing it directly on eddy lines and just casting just on the outside of the eddy line, where they have to come out and get it because they hear it coming with a rattle on it. Nice.
What about when it drops? If you have lower conditions, any secondary patterns that you'll kind of be on the lookout for?
Yeah, when the river's low, which is my optimum, what I really like to fish it when it's super low, I go to big flats where the forage here, crayfish and mad toms, are really on these flats that are like gravelly. Early morning, those fish are searching for something to eat. So I target flats and then follow them from there to deeper water. So I'll look at Google Maps, find flat areas where large grass beds are, not necessarily fish grass, but look for water that's no deeper than knee deep.
Nice. Well, I appreciate you sharing some of your tournament knowledge, and I wish you luck with the rest of your season. You've certainly cleaned up this year so far. I wish you further luck.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.